Good afternoon. You're listening to My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Today we are going to be talking about raising conscious children. And before we start, Dad, I want to ask you, what does that mean? Like, to you, what's the definition of a conscious child?
To me, a conscious child is someone who's highly aware of their own thoughts, their own emotions, their own fears. They're really in touch with themselves, and they're more of a student of self. And along that process, they're starting to accept themselves more. They're starting to love themselves more, and they are their own champion. You know, you hear a lot of times, even in songs, you hear, don't be your worst critic, or don't be your worst enemy. This is your biggest champion, and you're rooting for yourself, and you're championing yourself, and you're growing and discovering, and you're really a student of self, and you're always improving yourself. And so to have those kinds of qualities where you're just highly aware, I think that's the kind of kids that most parents really want them to be. They want their kids to be like that, to be loving and open and sharing, and to really take in the information that our parents are giving us, the wisdom and the advice. And so to me, that's what conscious children look like.
So do you think,
what does it look like to you? Because I'm interested in knowing your perspective.
Well, when you were describing that, I was wondering, I don't remember as a kid knowing, what unconscious and conscious is. The only thing I really remember was, I guess, doing something, making a decision, and then deciding afterwards, like, whatever the outcome was, like, oh, was this good or bad? And I mean that in, like, if I did something, was I going to get in trouble for it, or was it okay? Or I thought it was okay until I got in trouble for it. So I don't actually remember being conscious or unconscious, maybe because I didn't know, and then now, well, it's definitely because I didn't know, but now, looking back on it, I don't really know if kids are just really, naturally really highly conscious, and they're doing everything on their own, and being themselves, and being that little inner child, or being a kid and running around and having fun, or if they're doing things unconsciously and then they don't realize that it has consequences, or they don't realize, oh, this was a good thing or a bad thing, until somebody tells them.
And I think that's a great insight. For me, I believe that when we're young, we're learning, and we're learning by watching our parents. We're learning by reading books. We're learning by trial and error. But for the most part, I think that as human beings, we're all unconscious at some level when we're young, and we're all trying to do the best we can. That's where we default to, is, look, I'm just doing the best I can. But if you're doing the best you can unconsciously, you're only going to be able to create the results that come in the box of unconsciousness. When you become really highly aware, and someone teaches you or trains you, or you learn how to be more mindful and aware, and doing a self-check-in, you now grow out of that box from unconsciousness, and you start to move into different levels of consciousness, and you're more present, and you're in the moment, and you're thinking before you're making choices. You're making choices being proactive versus reactive, and you're getting different results. You're creating more powerful, meaningful results when you're more conscious as a child.
And to answer your question, I guess I honestly can say I don't know if I have a definition for a conscious child, and I didn't really think that, because you had asked me this question before the show started, and I was thinking about it, and I realized that I thought it was going to be simple. I thought it was going to be the same definition as a conscious adult, and it's not. In my head, I couldn't, all the things that I define a conscious adult as, I can't, I guess, wrap it around in my brain that a conscious child would look the same. I think maybe because I understand more of the, they're learning kind of thing than, they should know better, or, they should have known that. I can't say that about a kid, knowing that they don't know that.
Yeah.
and I think as a parent, or even me as a young adult, when I see kids doing things, throwing a temper tantrum, it's easy to say, oh, well, he should know he shouldn't write on the walls. But no, he doesn't know that. And it's hard to remember that, or it's challenging to remember that.
But so do parents. So do 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 80-year-olds. If they're really unconscious at a lower level, they don't know that either. They don't know that they shouldn't be putting people down. They don't know that and a lot of times, I know we started the show with the soundbite of being, having common sense. And and my response is some people don't have common sense. And I mean that in a way that some people haven't evolved to the level where their context is so big and so grand that they've learned some of those wise interpersonal breakthroughs that just make sense to them. Some of them are still, have you ever had somebody that still gossips and still, puts people down to make themselves feel better, and they all have all these unconscious games that the ego plays with them, and you're going, but that's my aunt, or that's my mom, she should know better. And some people don't know better. Some of them are stuck at a 4-year-old mentality, or a 12-year-old mentality, or still stuck at a 16-year-old emotional intelligence. And so I think that rules for everybody. Some people just don't know better. They haven't had that kind of contextual breakthrough yet.
Yeah, and as you're explaining that, I don't think sometimes people don't know better. I think sometimes people genuinely, they're so unconscious that they forget. Or I don't know if the word forget is appropriate, but for example, I was talking to my sister last night, and we were talking about, my brother came to visit, so we were talking about how he always flakes. So he'll say he's coming, and then he doesn't sometimes. So it was nice to see him. And we were saying, I don't know why mom and dad always are so surprised that he doesn't show up. They should know that they raised him like that. And we were talking about all of our faults too, not just about him. So sorry if you're listening. But we were talking about we as a family shouldn't be let down when he says he's going to come visit and he doesn't because he's busy, or he forgets to communicate he's not coming, or whatever. We shouldn't be let down because we should know better. We should know that we've contributed to this by not calling him out and saying, hey, you left me hanging, or,
that's not okay. You get to keep your word, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And as adults, even for you and mom, I know sometimes you guys expect like, oh, maybe this time he'll come, or hope. Maybe that's the word. You guys hope he'll come. And when
for me, it's not hope. For me, is I see his greater self, and I hold him to that level. So for me, it's not so much that I get let down. It's more of, I'm going to let you know that that's not who you are. I know you have the capacity to have your word be important and that it means something to you. And so I'm always holding not just him, but all of you guys at a higher level. I don't put you there like I have an expectation, because then I'm gonna be let down. But I see your greatness, and I hold you to that greatness, and I'm also gonna give myself permission, bless you, to also let you know that that's where I see you. And I think that that's healthy, is for me to keep reminding you that no, I see you as keeping your word, and I might have contributed to allow him to or not confront him when he was younger to not keep his word. That doesn't mean I can't learn now and start calling him on it.
Yeah, and that's the perfect word. Somehow, us as a family, we contribute to each other's, I don't want to say faults, but the things that...
Our shortcomings.
Yeah.
The things that we still need to learn, our lessons that we still need to discover about ourselves.
So as a family, or as a scenario, as kids that we're talking about, as parents, you guys are contributing to us as your kids, our shortcomings, or the way that we perceive things, the way we do things.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and going back to your question, like I said, I don't know the definition of a conscious child. I don't have that wrapped around in my brain yet, but hopefully by the end of this episode session, I'll figure one out.
I actually believe that you do have your own idea. You have your own experience of what it was like to, be aware and question yourself. It might just take some time to kind of remember what that process was like. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to learn how to become more conscious along my process earlier when you were younger, and I didn't start to get past that pivotal moment as a conscious father, and I caught you at the tail end of your childhood. Probably wasn't until you were 9 or 10 or 12 years old when I really wish that I would have been a lot more conscious and aware when you were born. But that's kind of the learning curve that we all have to go through, and that's why we're doing the shows, to try to help some of the new parents and some of the parents that have young adults. And it doesn't matter at what level you're at, it's never too late to learn and start to grow, so that you can make those course corrections and adapt yourself to really set your kids up to win.
So in order for me to I guess remember or realize or come to that conclusion what it looks like to be a conscious child, can you explain what it looks like in your experience when you see an unconscious child? What does that look like?
Yeah, most unconscious children are victims to their circumstances, so they blame their parents for everything. They live in the paradigm that you're doing this to me, I can't believe this, I can't believe that. They haven't been taught how to choose the perspective of taking responsibility for their life. And a lot of times in my training room, that's one of the core distinctions that we teach the kids is how to choose to see your life as though you're the author of it, that you're creating it, and that you've been co-creating it the whole time with your parents, and that it's powerless to choose the victim perspective when the responsible perspective is actually an option. So I teach them that victim perspective is powerless and responsible version is powerful, because the responsible version, you actually have choices. You can actually change it. From the victim perspective, you can't make any changes. It's happening to me. You're doing this to me, and I don't have any options. It's like I'm backed in a corner and there's nothing I can do. With the responsible version, of course you have choices. You can change it by either speaking up for yourself or having the courage to confront someone, or to have the option to choose to walk away from something or go around it, or take it on, or whatever it is. So that's, I think the first step is when I see kids that are unconscious, is they're not aware that they have choices. That would be the second thing, is that I have choices. The world isn't just happening to me. I'm actually this powerful being that lives in the world, that I can actually use some of my choices as tools in my belt to create new results for myself. I was never taught that as a kid. I never knew that I was this powerful, magnificent being at 5 years old, at 9 years old, that I can actually, with my choices, create the kind of life that I wanted. I didn't realize that until my mid-20s. But if we teach our kids that they are mighty and they are powerful, and that they can create different results from shifting their perspective, or choosing new ways to see things, that's really what personal power is about. And so unconscious kids blame, unconscious kids check out, they run away from their problems, they get depressed, they're sad, they don't experience their emotions. They're not taught that it's okay to feel your feelings, that's a healthy way to express yourself. They're at some point in their life taught that you don't feel your feelings, you shut them down or you suppress them. And they might not be taught that directly, but more indirectly based on how our parents parent us. Because I'm sure you've seen, parents at the mall and little kids crying, and their parents are like, shh, okay, stop that now, or stop crying. And you, I'm sure, as a conscious young woman, that probably hurts your heart, because you're like, that poor baby, he's either tired or hungry or something's going on, and them crying is a way to let you know. It's like a warning sign, and all you're doing is kind of suppressing that.
Yeah, when you were saying they're indirectly, teaching them not to feel their emotions, the first thing I was imagining was, a baby whose diaper's not changed and he's crying, and the parents are embarrassed at the mall and they're telling him to be quiet or shush or shut up or whatever that looks like. And I've seen that before, where a baby's just crying, and in my head the first thing I think is like, oh, well, his diaper's probably wet, because I don't know, I know a lot of people don't really pay attention to that. And so always, like, I'll just stare. I probably am that person that, like, stares at them and they think that I'm judging them, but I'm staring at them because I'm really interested in how the parents are going to react to that baby crying. And especially when I see young parents, because it's really interesting to me. So, but when you were saying that, I was imagining them growing up and being told, yes, the shush, and then also the little young boys being told, like, oh, what are you crying about? And really common when I was younger was like, oh, I'll give you something to cry about. The men would tell the other men, my brother, my little cousins, or whatever. I would hear that. And I know you used to joke when we were little too. You'd be like, come here, I'll give you something to cry about, and you would tickle me. And like, so I would, like, stop crying and everything. But I think that there's a lot of shutting your kids down, where, at least for me when I was younger, I was taught that it's okay to cry, and so maybe I cry too much now, or maybe I'm too emotional now. So or that's at least feedback that I get from people. I think
sometimes. That's a belief you have. I think it's beautiful when people cry, and maybe that's why because I have the belief that it's okay to cry, and I believe it's beautiful and it's healthy. It's a healthy releasing, and it's a natural process, and it's organic, way to heal ourselves and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's why people feel safe enough around me to let their emotions go. But that might be a belief that you've created somewhere along gathering the rules at which you live your life, that it's not okay to cry. And I think that society has a lot to do with that, and maybe the homes we grow up in, or that especially maybe as a woman, maybe when you're younger, you decided it's not okay to cry because I got to be strong. And if I cry, that's a sign of weakness, and then I'm not going to have the world take me serious, or whatever conversation you've created that limits you from feeling your natural feelings. One of the greatest things I've ever learned from a book that I don't remember the name, but it was something like How to Raise Emotional, Intelligent Kids, and it was talking about giving your kids when they're 4 and 5 years old the space to feel their emotions organically and not be in resistance to it, or not shut them down or tell them not to do it. Just create this safe space for them to feel it and let it come up. And if you let a child cry for a half hour or 45 minutes and you don't get in there and taint that moment and just let it happen organically, what happens is the more times that they do that, they cry 45 minutes and then 30 minutes and then 20 minutes and then 10 and then 8. What you're doing is you're training them to learn how to get through their emotions quicker. So as an adult, they've already trained themselves to feel sad, be sad, feel the sadness, and then run through the course of being sad in a healthy way, which is teaching them how to get off of it quicker. Like, all right, I'm sad. I get to be sad for, a half hour or a day or however long it takes, and then I'm off it. But if you suppress kids from feeling those emotions, you'll have young adults or adults that are sad for 3 days, 7 days, weeks, months. And then now you're wondering why your kids are clinically depressed. It's because maybe there's a possibility that you didn't create a safe space for them to learn how to move through their emotions faster and to kind of see it as a healthy, cleansing, and cathartic way to let stuff go.
What do you say, or I don't know if you ever come across this, but I've definitely heard parents say before, like things like, oh, why, I don't know why my kid's sad for. He's 10. He has nothing to be sad about. Or I don't know what he could be depressed about. He's 15. And do you ever get those clients? Because I feel like people compare the things that they have going on. A parent will say, oh, I have this going on, and I'm not depressed, and it's way worse than what little Timmy has, so there's no way he could be depressed. Have you ever had that before?
I do, and it depends on how much of a credibility I have with that person, or I've developed as a coach with them, that I can give them raw feedback to where they can hear it and still come back tomorrow. Some of my clients, when it starts off really intense in the beginning, I can give them that raw feedback, and they get their wall comes up and they get defensive, or they weren't really coachable in the beginning in the first place, and so then I become the one that's not the kind of right coach for them or whatever. But I try to do a little song and dance where I can be compassionate about letting them know, hey, there's a difference between you and your son. And my job is to try to remind them that you're a 35-year-old woman that's gone through a lot of ups and downs in their life and failures, and has developed and grown and is wise. Your 14-year-old daughter is not. Your 14-year-old daughter has some insecurities that you need to learn how to be compassionate for, meet her where she's at, and walk her through that process from a loving, caring, compassionate, and patient mom. And maybe there's a possibility that in those areas of those different distinctions I just gave you, that there's more improvement, and there's area of improvement for you to get to higher levels of being when it comes to being patient and compassionate and nurturing, and all those great distinctions that we need as conscious parents to kind of handhold our kids through those processes.
Yeah, and I'm imagining, I know we had to take a break real quick, but I want to get this thought out. I'm imagining a boy, for some reason, who's upset about whatever, and again, there's that stigma that boys can't, cry or be upset about things. But if you go to your mom, she probably might not have the answer if it's a boy thing. And if you go to your dad and he's telling you, oh, that's not even an issue right now, I can't, like, I guess I can't imagine him, because as a girl, I would go to my room and I would cry or be like, no one understands me, or whatever my teenage thing was. And I can't imagine a boy doing that. I imagine a boy just suppressing it and going back to his room and being like, oh, okay, this is nothing then. And it just, like, sitting there with them.
And that's commonly what happens. They suppress it. And what happens is a year later, 2 years later, three years later, however long that process takes, they either start acting out and their behavior starts to change. Some of them start hanging out with a cousin or a friend that's not good influence, and they start doing bad things, drinking, smoking weed, doing things to feel again, because what they've been doing is suppressing all those emotions, and they numb themselves out. So to feel good again, I gotta feel high, I gotta feel good. It's like, oh my God, this is what it feels like to feel alive. No, what it feels like to be alive is to flush out all that stuff, heal yourself, get the kind of healing you need so you can naturally feel alive.
We got to take a quick break really quick. So stay tuned for more of My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.